Welcome to Roar Healing Stories. I'm your host, Ellen Line. Let's dive in. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Roar Healing Stories. Today, my guest is Amy. Amy and I met, we're like Substack buddies, and we met through some really beautiful COVID grief workshops that Amy offered last year. And we have worked together, collaborated on a few different things. And I'm really excited for y'all to meet her today. And so here we go. Amy, tell us about yourself.
Hi, Ellen. It's really fun to get together again and chat with you. As you said, I'm Amy Walsh, and I'm an ER doctor by trade, but I'm kind of a weird ER doctor. I am really into herbalism and foraging and divination and all sorts of witchy stuff. And I really feel like my view of health is, a lot more expansive than you traditionally encounter interacting with the healthcare system. So, yeah.
I am so excited to hear more. Tell us about your healing journey.
Yeah. Where to even start? I think I finished my emergency medicine training and I did a global emergency medicine fellowship, and I kind of got to the end of that. And, as with many things in life that are long journeys, that you're kind of like, oh, everything will be better when I'm done with X. When you get done with that long of training, you kind of get there and you're like, oh, is that all there is? Like, is this what it's going to be like for the rest of my career? And so had a bit of an existential crisis with that, but eventually kind of got to the point where I was like, oh, you know what? I can work about 30 hours a week and provide for my family, and I'm reasonably good at this, and I can just, do this and have other hobbies and passions, and we're okay. And that was kind of the status quo. I have two daughters. One is 9 and one is 6. And so definitely early motherhood kind of upset the apple cart with that a little bit, I think, in a few ways. Yeah. One was just kind of my husband was a stay-at-home dad at that time and kind of navigating the division of labor in our household. But it was really much more than that, of just kind of unintentionally ending up way more connected to my intuition and just really interested in all these different ways of knowing that I had never been exposed to before. And so that was a really big transformation in and of itself, of just kind of realizing oh, hey, there's not any normal to go back to. You have to just kind of become someone new. And so my youngest daughter was 10 months old in March of 2020 when all of the pandemic stuff started. And to be honest, the early pandemic was actually there was definitely a lot of anxiety, but it was weirdly pleasant because it was just sort of this clearing out of everything that wasn't essential. So and we didn't have that much of a change. Our kids were staying home with my husband. We didn't have a childcare crisis, and I was still going to work in person. So it wasn't that different than it was for most people. And so, and it was just the ER was a ghost town. Everyone was just very afraid to go to the ER. And so it just was, people wouldn't go unless they really had to be there. And so I was, outside a lot. I was exercising a lot. It was really good. And then because the ER didn't really get super busy until that fall, and actually didn't until really the following July, after vaccines were widely available. So July 2021 was kind of when it started getting difficult. And things really kind of came to a head in October 2021. So I had from that July to October, it was just constant overwhelm at work, feeling like we were the pressure release valve for everyone else in the hospital, everyone else in the community, really, and not having our own pressure release valve. And then at the end of October, the police brought in this guy for a blood draw because they thought he had been driving under the influence. And he was very agitated, and they had like 8 officers come in with him, which is definitely not the usual way that happens. And so he was threatening to kill everybody. And it was kind of, and I don't know, it was a weird situation because I didn't think that he would act on that threat, but I was more just mad that the police had brought him and kept, it was like, at this point you have enough to arrest him whether he was drunk or not, right? So anyway, it was just kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And so after that, I was kind of explaining to my husband everything that happened. He was like, maybe you need to go talk to someone about this. And I was like, well, yeah, I probably do. But I don't know if this was your experience too. But for me, it was like, if I had it to do all over again, I would have like lined up a therapist I wanted to talk to when I was still feeling fine. Because like the most overwhelming thing that I could imagine at that time was trying to find a therapist. I don't know what to do. There's so many. And like, and at that time it was sort of like figuring out meeting in person or online, or you could even go to people in other states. It was just like, So I signed up for BetterHelp for a while. And the therapist I worked there, like, she was a very nice person, but like, I didn't feel comfortable kind of bringing all of my woo-woo spiritual beliefs to the table there. And just as it happened, John Wolfstone, a guy that I had kind of learned about adulthood initiation from, was just starting to do like one-on-one work and reached out about that. And I was like, oh, that feels perfect because it's going to, like, had always been interested in adulthood initiation, and kind of the way he did it along with that process, there was a lot of emotional work as part of the process. So it was kind of weaving both of those together.
Okay. Can you tell us what adulthood initiation means?
Yeah. So I think probably the thing that most people would be familiar with adulthood initiation would be a vision fast, of going out into the wilderness for a period of days and fasting and, hoping for a vision that kind of guides your direction in life. But really the process is a lot longer than that in traditional societies, where there's kind of this whole buildup of different tasks and milestones that you are building the skills for, that allow you, when you return from that fast, to be welcomed into the community with a clear purpose and direction and like a new role that you're going to step into as an adult. Bill Plotkin talks about it as like, he uses a butterfly analogy of like, like in our society, like most of us are still adolescents. And so we're acting as caterpillars, where we just go around and consume and consume and consume. And we never go into that chrysalis to come out the butterfly, where we are in service of the greater ecosystem through whatever our respective way of pollinating would be. So,
I love that metaphor. And if we run with that a little bit, can you tell us like the caterpillar version of Amy? Like what were the things that you needed to work through in the chrysalis in order to become the butterfly?
Yeah, I think there are at least 3 main bits, and probably more. But I think that the biggest one was probably just kind of growing my comfort level with negative emotions and with being able to give people feedback about those, that, hey, I'm angry about this. And rather than just being like, oh, I'm sure they didn't mean it, to say, hey, this happened. This was how I felt about it.
Yeah.
What was your experience of it?
Yeah.
How could it be different, and that's definitely still a work in progress for me. I think that rationalization is probably one of my superpowers, where like I can just kind of be like, oh, I'm sure they did it because of this. They're, where it's like, if my emotion doesn't stand up in court, I'm kind of like, I'm just gonna. But I think that part of that journey was kind of conducting almost little experiments of putting myself in those situations to say, hey, I'm angry about this. Let's talk about it. And realize like, oh, I can be angry and be okay at the same time. And that was like kind of groundbreaking information. And I think also just kind of getting comfortable with staying present with my own suffering. Like the ER is sort of a unique environment because it is just so incredibly easy to find someone that has it worse than you. Whether that is a patient or a different staff member or a different department of the hospital or whatever, it's very easy to be like, oh, well, they have it worse, so what I'm experiencing isn't important. And so just to kind of be able to be like, wait, this isn't the suffering Olympics. Like, you don't have to be suffering the worst to be suffering, and that you can just be present with that and not try to run away from it.
Yeah. That is like with almost everyone I work with, there is some of that, right? Like usually it happens pretty early on in the journey where we kind of have to work through like, maybe what happened to you wasn't the worst thing that could have happened to a person, and it had an impact. Right. And like, here you are, years later having to deal with the fallout.
And a lot of times that realization of like, you adapted to that impact in a way that was probably really helpful at that time. But now it's causing these downstream impacts that are no longer helpful. But And I think the last thing that was kind of like a big pillar of the chrysalis was just like my relationship to control and certainty. And just like, I don't know, as an example, my dad gave me my first ACT prep book when I was in like 6th or 7th grade. And told me like, hey, this is how we're going to pay for college. And like, he's someone who, plans trips in 15-minute intervals. And so like that, like having a plan has always been important to me. And so like making a big change without a plan is just like, oh, like that's not gonna work. And I've had to really, like, especially after, we didn't really talk about this yet, but I took a leave of absence from work starting last spring. And so especially in that period of time, just really being like, I don't know what's going to come next, and just trying to like not escape that. I think like I definitely have made decisions in the past just to sort of escape my discomfort with uncertainty. And so like that's definitely an area of growth where I can be like, this is really uncomfortable, and making a decision before I'm ready to make a decision is not going to be helpful in the long run.
But were there moments or practices or exercises, or you mentioned experiments earlier, that helped you be able to be comfortable with the uncertainty and the out of controlness? Like, tell us a little bit about that journey.
Like the journey of building that comfort level, you mean? I mean, I think the first step was just kind of acknowledging that the vast majority of the things that I was trying to control, like I didn't actually have any control over. So it was more like a game of pretend that I was playing to help myself feel better. And so like a lot of it was just sort of reality checking, of just like, hey, I'm really stressing about this thing, but there's not anything I can actually do about it.
Yeah.
And then once that happened, once I had that reality check of like, oh, I personally can't do anything about this, then that's really where prayer became a big part of it, of like, oh, I can't do anything about this. So I just have to like rest it somewhere else. And so I grew up in the Catholic tradition and have kind of come back to the Catholic Church, but I definitely pray to, I mean, I think that's one thing that's kind of cool about Catholicism actually, is that Catholics don't just pray to Jesus or to God. They also pray to Mary, to the saints, to the angels, and all that kind of thing. And I think for me, my view of prayer is even more expansive than that, of calling in ancestors, calling in wild forces, just like a whole bunch of things. But at that time last spring, one thing that was specifically helpful, and I think most people associate the rosary with Catholicism just kind of like one-to-one. But the book, The Way of the Rose, by Clark Strand and Perdita Finn, is a really beautiful book. I think Clark Strand is like a Buddhist, and Mary basically like appeared to him and was like, you need to pray the rosary. And so they talk about it in a, I don't know, non-denominational isn't the right word, because I feel like that's just different Christian denominations, but like, just like holistically, that this can be a practice for connecting to kind of like the divine feminine or the mother, or like however you conceptualize that. But last spring, there's a specific way of praying the rosary that's called the Surrender Novena, where it's like 9 days of praying the rosary. And there's like a prayer of just kind of casting yourself upon Jesus and just being like, I trust you, help me. That was kind of an especially helpful practice in that time, where it just felt like everything was really up in the air.
Yeah. I love that. I have a question that's a little bit maybe a change in topic.
Sure.
So earlier when you were talking about early motherhood, and I know like for you that intersected with your second kiddo with early COVID, and you said something like you had new access to intuition, or there was something about intuition that shifted for you around that time. And that's been something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, is just relationship to intuition and where do we put our trust. And so I'm curious to hear more about that journey, like how your relationship with intuition. And also I think like, knowing you're a doctor and coming out of like this sort of Western medicine tradition, it's like, that system laughs at intuition, right? They're like, what do you mean? Like, this isn't the right treatment for you. Like, I'm telling you, the randomized controlled trials are saying that this is the right thing for you, right? Like, to me, they're like nearly incompatible. So I'm just like, I'm curious to hear about your journey with your intuition.
Yeah. Well, interesting that you say that with medicine. I think that you're right that within medical training, like there's a diminishment of the importance of intuition. And then as you practice, you definitely realize that intuition is an essential part of the practice of medicine. In fact, there are even research studies, the one that comes to that kind of test sort of like provider, the medical term for it is provider gestalt, to make it sound, I don't know, more jargony, I guess. But gestalt is intuition, right?
Yeah.
And so like some studies will say, oh, it's not as good as X, Y, or Z test. But for example, there's a criteria called the Walsh criteria that we use to kind of evaluate the likelihood that someone has a blood clot in their lungs and to guide us on what next test is most appropriate to check for that, if any test is needed. Yeah. And the criteria that carries the most weight is physician gestalt, which is intuition. So there actually is a lot of intuition kind of in the art of medicine. But it's interesting because it's not consciously cultivated or coached or things like that. It's more just, and to a certain extent, I don't know how much it can be. It's sort of something that you have to develop with experience, but, it's just an interesting, like in this era of evidence-based everything, kind of like you were saying, of like, when you look at a study, what you're seeing in the results is sort of like the average response by the average person. And so being able to pick out like how you as an individual will respond to this based on how many of the criteria in the study you personally meet versus being, way off here, an outlier, can be a really interesting, thought exercise, I guess is probably the best way to put it. But as a mom, I think that, it kind of started with like, I feel like up to that point, the kind of feminism I ascribed to was kind of a women can do everything, men can do backwards and in heels sort of like, I don't know, kind of girl bossy kind of feminism. And I heard Kimberly Ann Johnson talk about this after she became a mom. Am I allowed to swear on here?
Yeah, that's fine.
Of just like giving birth and then just like realizing it's just this totally different set of powers and set of gifts. And like that kind of feminism is like, oh, it's all bullshit, of just like, this, that giving birth is sort of this power of like creation and destruction and fertility and creativity and just like all of these different, nurturance and just so many different gifts that are vitally important that before I just really had not connected to in myself, had not prioritized. And I also think that like, just sort of, in my medical practice, like to be a bit vulgar about it, but like I could use medications to make people eat, sleep, or poop whenever I want, and then you have a baby and you don't have that power that in the same way, and so you're just kind of trying to harmonize with them and learn their rhythms to be able to do those things. So yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. It sounds like maybe that it's not that you like didn't have any sense of connection to intuition before, but becoming a mom really like forced you to develop that maternal intuition and caring for your kiddos. And then that maybe shifted. I guess I'm curious if there are things that you've done since you became a mom to like further develop your connection to your intuition.
I think before I became a mom, like I sort of knew intuition was important, but I also was a new enough doctor that I didn't really feel like I had much of it to kind of hang my hat on. And kind of the same as a mom. Like I still don't know that I would say that I'm an especially intuitive person. But I think that maybe what changed was more how much I valued intuition as a way to understand something rather than just having it be all from the rational mind. And I think part of that was an experiential thing, but part of it is also just the science of it, of like how many data points your subconscious mind can pick up and analyze and process versus how many your conscious mind can, and how many things that, like, if you had to articulate a reason for your decision, like the whole thing kind of falls apart, but it's still the right way to go,
Yeah. 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 I think about that. I think as a therapist, my practice is very intuitive. And I had a supervisor who would she was like, you have to, every time we had a meeting, she was like, okay, and now what's your theory? What's your theory? What's your theory? And I think she was trying to get me to do that, linking a little bit between you're in the moment, you're going to make a decision that's based nearly entirely on your intuition. And then you kind of, if you try, you can kind of explain it, or you can kind of fit it into your theory afterward. Right. But I don't do that anymore. I'm just I tried this and either it worked or it didn't, and then we go from there. And we follow, there's a little bit of,
and part of that might even be just teaching you to cultivate that skill for the sake of documentation or things like that, those type of things, rather than direct patient care but there's this interesting study. I read about this, God, probably 15 years ago. So I'm probably butchering it, but there was this study where they had showed people two posters, and I think they got to pick one. And for some of the people, they made them explain why they liked it, versus it was a hang in there cat and a magic eye poster or something. I don't even know. But the ones that kind of had to explain why they liked especially a cheesy, it would change what they liked, even having to articulate it. Or that they would grow to not like it, and so it's kind of I don't know, fencing yourself in that way. Changes your perception of things too.
I feel like my brain is, I'm integrating. I'm feeling kind of blown away. I think the way that we talk about it in therapy, the way that therapy is connected to Western medicine, we talk about practice wisdom, right? As that sort of therapist intuition. And I just had no idea that there was a sort of analog for MD doctors, Yeah. So I'm my brain is being blown by that. My brain is being blown by what you just told me about how having to explain your instinct can change your instinct, But it makes sense to me, right? It's that difference between that sort of rational understanding or that rational way of wanting to interact with the world and the intuitive way of following flow or whatever it is that we are noticing when we're making an intuitive decision. So you've been on a journey around kind of moving from a more rationalize-y place to a more intuitive place. And I guess I'm wondering if there are maybe similar question to before, have there been practices or exercises or moments or experiences that have helped you shift along that journey?
A couple come to mind, and I'm not sure how directly related they are to intuition, but so I think one of the first things that was interesting with becoming a mom was I think even before, when you first get pregnant, your imagination just starts to wander and imagine what this person is like and what they're going to become. I got to the point when I was pregnant of looking up the horoscopes and things like that, because I was just I just need some data points about what this person was going to be like. I had all these grand ideas about taking my baby hiking and immersing them in nature and all this, and hadn't really come to terms with or experienced wait, this is an individual person who is separate from me, and they don't belong to me, and I can't like control all of these things. And so my oldest daughter in particular, she's beautifully sensitive, like just like, and when she was a toddler was just like so sensitive, where like the sun was too bright, the wind was too strong, and so all of these ideas that I had about her becoming a great outdoorsman or outdoorswoman just weren't really, and she, now as she's bigger, like really does like to do some outdoor stuff, but it's just not kind of the same way that I engage with it. And so, part of it was actually gathering rational information to understand that difference. And so like, what is her name? Elaine Aronson, I think, with the Highly Sensitive Person books and Highly Sensitive Child. And so reading that book was really helpful for me to be able to be like, oh, like your experience of this is just different than mine. So like, I can't be like, oh, it's not that bright. Like, like, and just that kind of invalidating of experience. And so I think that then like having that rational information then allowed me to kind of respond in a more nurturing, intuitive way, so that they're kind of, like braiding with each other, and, that they can reinforce each other in really helpful ways, but like rational information can also obviously lead you to kind of discount that or neglect it or push it off to the side. I think the other intuition thing that's maybe like a little more far out is like I started foraging. Like the first foraging experience that I had, I was working in a community garden, and one of the women there was like, this plant is lamb's quarters. It's a weed. We need to pull it out of here, but it's tastier than spinach and it's more nutritious than spinach, and you should eat it. And so I would, I'd bring my grocery bag. I'd pack up all the lamb's quarters and put it in my salad that night at dinner. And so that kind of just started a big curiosity about that. And I took some foraging classes, but it's really interesting because once you start foraging, the line between food and medicine is really blurry, right? Is an herbal tea food or is it medicine? And of course it's not one or the other, right? And then once you kind of get into herbalism and plants as medicine, then I think it's really not a far leap at all to start engaging with plants as spiritual beings, and really starting to connect with them in a relationship kind of way. And so I think that's probably the other intuitive thing, is just kind of, listening to trees and other plants, and engaging in like meeting their plant spirits. And sometimes I'll get just really wonderful messages. I have a special tree out here in the yard where I have my altar. And one time it told me, never let a good disturbance go to waste. And so part of that is just kind of practical. In our yard, we have a lot of molehills. So I try to always have seeds on hand to be able to scatter in them. But I think just within our lives, it's a good thing to like think about like, hey, this disturbance cleared out X, Y, and Z, and being intentional about kind of what grows in after that. Yeah. And then another tree encounter, I was just having a really anxious day, and I went out to this stand of aspen trees that we have in our yard. And with quaking aspen, they're trees that are kind of known to be good for like anxiety and things like that. I was just there and I was just thinking about how like our waste is their nourishment, carbon dioxide, or how like our urine and feces are fertilizer to plants and things like that. And so I was thinking about that kind of in a more emotional context of like that plants can kind of help us heal our emotions and kind of sink them into the earth and help us kind of process them and let go. But the reciprocation that the tree was communicating to me is that we take their emotions and put them into action because we have these mobile bodies and they don't, that is the role that we are supposed to be taking kind of within the ecosystem, is to listen and take action based on what we hear.
Wow.
Yeah. So those are some of the intuitive things that like, that if someone was like, but how do you know? Like, I'd be like, it's entirely possible that I have a fantastic imagination and I just made this all up. And if so, like, cool, because that makes me feel really smart. But it felt like it came from outside of me. So
Yeah. Mm. Oh, I love that. I feel like I'm like processing a little bit. Where do we want to go from here?
yeah, take your time.
Because I feel like one of the questions that I sometimes ask folks is like, healing can look so many different ways. What are some unconventional like healing experiences that you have? But I feel like everything you've told us about so far has been kind of an unconventional healing experience. So I love that. Are there other moments that have been especially meaningful to you?
Well, probably the most magical one was right before I went on my wilderness fast. I went to Wales, and my passport had. So I didn't find out about this opportunity to go to Wales until about 7 weeks before it was going to happen, and my passport had expired. And this was back in 2023. I guess I don't know if it's actually gotten better or not, but like in 2023, there was like a huge backup on passports, and it was taking like 12 to 16 weeks for passports to be processed. And so and there were a few other logistical things as far as getting out of ships at work and things like that had to fall into place for me to be able to go. And so I was trying to kind of address things in all realms, in the practical realm of emailing my senator and being like, help, but also in the spiritual realm. And so another practice that I have along with kind of connecting to plant spirits is connecting to my ancestors. And there's some really beautiful practices. The main ones that I've worked with are through Daniel Foer's work. He has a book called Ancestral Medicine, and he's trained a lot of people in kind of the methods of connecting to ancestral guides and things like that. And so I was kind of, I don't know, doing sort of like a combination journey of journeying with my ancestors and with nettle, which is a plant that's really special to me.
Yeah.
And through this journey, what came through, like they kind of told me some offerings that I needed to bring to Wales, but one of the offerings they told me was that I needed to bring a prayer song. And I've never written a song in my life. It was just kind of like, I don't even know how to do that.
Yeah.
But a few nights later, I just lit a fire in our fire pit, and I was just sitting out there and just kind of being like, oh, how am I gonna do that? And this melody, boom, just popped into my head. And so I just kind of kept humming the melody until it like stuck. And then once that was there, then like just the words just kind of appeared out of nowhere. And so it was really beautiful. But the most amazing part was I think it was literally the next day I got an email saying your passport has been processed and it's going to be here in time. So it was another one of those kind of far out moments.
Yeah. Wow. But the synchronicity of like getting this guidance and then having the song just come to you. And then, the very next day, like your passport's going to work.
And I think like that's one of the coolest things that happens with creativity sometimes is just how many times we're really more of like a channel or something that needs to come into the world rather than like the mastermind of it. That's something that's been really, I don't know, eye-opening and helpful for me as I've started performing divinations and things like that, is just realizing like how many times things come through that there's just no possible way that I could rationally know that about this person that I've met twice and on a Zoom call with or whatever, and then this really important piece of information comes through and you just realize like, oh yeah, this is not me. Like I am just communicating something from beyond me, that, and just kind of giving voice to that, rather than it, just being my individual spectacular brilliance or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So that helps you, like, having these experiences where you're getting information that, like, you really have no business getting, helps you trust that it helps you trust the skill that you have built, or I don't know, it feels weird to call intuition a skill, but to trust the practice that you have listening to your intuition.
Yeah. And it's almost like, not even like trusting me and my intuition, but it's trusting like I can sort of let go of this and just like receive this information and pass it on. It's sort of like trusting, like, hey, there is definitely something far beyond me that this is coming from. And like, I don't have to do it or figure it out or make it smart or important or beautiful. It's just like, I just need to sort of be open to what is there and what's trying to come through.
Yeah. Would you like to talk more? So, full disclosure for the folks at home, Amy, when she was learning divination, reached out to me and offered a practice. Like, she was practicing, but I was receiving the divination, and it's very, very cool. And I wonder if you want to talk more about it.
Sure. Yeah, it's a really so I was initially exposed to divination. I don't know, it was another one of those kind of synchronistic things. Lindsay Sudeikis, who I've worked with a lot in kind of the ancestral healing practices that I did, also does this style of divination. And then John, who I worked with in my wilderness fast, also does it. And so I'd received a few divinations from him. And I'll talk a little bit more about kind of what it is and what's involved in a little bit. But it was like one of those where I was like, this is so cool. Like, what a cool thing that other people are able to do, and it just seems like one of those things that like these cool spiritual people over here get to do this. And it just like felt like, I'm glad there are people in the world that can do this. Woe is me, I will never get to do it. And then like after, then like, I don't know, at some point John was doing a divination for me, and it came through to him that I was supposed to learn how to do this. And I was just blown away. Cause like I said, it's like, I feel like both with like creativity and a lot of spiritual things, I'm just like, oh, like, I'm glad, like, that's so nice that those other people have the skills to be able to do that. And so, yeah, so just earlier this spring, I was initiated into a type of divination. It's from West Africa, the Dagara tribe. And I guess I'll just kind of talk about sort of my experience of what seems to happen when I do it. But there are different pieces that represent like the feminine, the grandfathers, the mountains, the waters, just all these different pieces. And actually, I shouldn't use the word represent. In the Dagara tradition, it's not really like a representational thing. It's like, this is the waters, this is the earth, that kind of thing. And so these different pieces will kind of, I don't know, like come forward, so to speak, saying that they have something to comment about the questions that the person is bringing. And usually the information that comes through is either kind of a specific image or a bodily sensation. And that one was really surprising to me. The first divination I ever did for anyone when I was kind of first training, what came through was just these intense bodily emotional sensations. Which was super interesting as a physician, because I feel like that part of it is something that we often are kind of turning off or disconnecting from in our daily practice. And so just to kind of like tune into that as kind of a specific important source of information was a really cool and a little challenging mindset shift. But yeah, so then through that, you'll kind of, and in conversation with the person you're working with, you'll kind of sort through sort of the relevance of those pieces of information. But a lot of times also rituals will come through, or different healing practices for yourself, or relationships that need to be repaired in a specific way, or all sorts of things. And so, it can be, a profound experience sometimes to just to just kind of engage in the world in these realms that we're not always as connected to as like our ancestors traditionally would have been. So,
yeah. I'm curious if I know it's like a deeply personal and potentially vulnerable and spiritual thing, but I'm curious if you're comfortable sharing, and if not, it's totally okay, to hear more about connecting with your ancestors and that journey.
Yeah. So I first learned that it was even a thing that you could do, I think, from Resmaa Menakem, who's a trauma therapist. I think I heard an interview with him and Krista Tippett right after the murder of George Floyd. And so I started reading his book. And I think what really struck me was like, hey, all of the traumatic things that white people have been doing to Black bodies, Indigenous bodies, all of that, they had been doing to themselves for like 1,000 years. And so in order to be able to heal those relationships with other groups, we first have to be able to heal our own ancestral wounds. And he talked also about epigenetics, about the genetic changes that occur if you grow up in a stressful situation or whatever. But there are some animal studies that suggest that those can persist for like 14 generations.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's in mice, so it obviously could be quite different. But if that is the case for humans, that's like 350 years ago. And so I was just really struck by that. And he had some recommendations of people that could kind of help white folks do that work. And I kind of went down the rabbit hole with that and started working with Lindsay. And the cool thing about the ancestral medicine practices is that you're going back looking for these ancestral guides, like kind of going back in time, like 2,000, 3,000 years to when there was sort of a healthy, intact culture, and then calling on them to help heal the people in the interim. And so, and I would say in general, my experience with it is that when I do it, like, they're often just a major source of love and reassurance. And like, it's just like a really good feeling to interact with them. One example that I think is really funny was before my 40th birthday. I was planning to host a story share on my 40th birthday. And so I was trying to, I don't know, decide sort of like how, like, ta-da, to be about it. And I was kind of like, I kind of want to wear a flower crown, but I was just like, that seems like a little over the top. I don't think I'm going to do it. And so I was working with Lindsay, and she was doing kind of a Bieltana, like a May 1st focused ancestral healing. And one of the things that came through, or one of the questions she suggested we ask our ancestors, was how they traditionally celebrated. And like the first thing that came through was, so it was like, we wore flower crowns, and I was like, oh, all right. And so I called up the flower shop and was like, I need a flower crown.
I love that. I'm just like really appreciating this conversation. I'm curious if there's anything else that like, I know I sent you a whole list of questions. Was there anything that you had like in your mind that you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about?
I don't know that it's totally directly related, but maybe it'll, like, I think it's probably more on my mind just as I'm working on the book that I'm writing about like how narrow we've come to think of healing within at least the Western biomedical model of it just being our physical health of the individual with their organ systems separated from all of the other organ systems, which is just not reality. You know, and so like just kind of taking the mind, like the body out of the mind and away from the emotions and all those things, but also taking it away from the social connections and the ecological connections and all of those aspects of it as well. Yeah, I think that I don't know that I have too much more to say about it, but just kind of wanted to call attention to the connections that real health kind of depends on. And I think also Martha Beck talked about it in one of her books about kind of the narrow understanding of what a healer is as well. Of like a lot of times the understanding is like healer equals doctor or something like that. Or like just one thing. But the traditional understanding would have been that the healer is, yes, a doctor and an herbalist, but also an artist and a storyteller and a, you know, like someone who knew the stars and a shaman and like all these things woven together. So I just kind of wanted to, I don't know, place that more expansive understanding into people's hearts to kind of dream about what could be.
Yes, I love that. I think that's so important, right? Because it's like, it sometimes happens, right, that I am working with someone and we're doing a lot of really great work, but they're in an environment or they're in a relationship or they're in a job that's like really counterproductive to that healing. And it's like, as soon as they leave that job or they leave that relationship or they leave that environment, like so much unlocks, right? And it's like, we forget that, you know, where we spend so much of our time is such a crucial part of how we feel inside, outside, in our mind, in our body, you know, and I just, that's such an important, I think that expansiveness is so important when we're trying to find healing that's like robust and meaningful.
I mean, it kind of depends on what's broken, right? Like if it's something that really is mechanistic and straightforward, like, oh, I dislocated my shoulder, I just need my shoulder put back in. It's like, that separated view oftentimes is in service, but so many times I think that, you know, especially for long-term issues and things like that, it's just so much more complicated. And you just kind of have to pull a thread and then see what it's connected to and pull that thread and keep going.
That makes me think about what we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, and with your health coaching, and we're also getting into a little bit of like our wrap up space. So I would love for you to share more about sort of what you're offering in the world and how folks can connect with you, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, if anyone's interested in divination, I am definitely offering that. I usually just do it as sort of like a free will contribution, or we can do it in trade or however, like a pay what you can sort of thing. So and you can just reach out to me on my website and I'll give Ellen all the info about that. But as far as the health coaching goes, I think that the way I look at it is really about building 4 key relationships: the relationship to the divine, the sacred, the relationship to the earth, the relationship to self, and the relationship to community. And so the relationship to self, some of it is really kind of practical nitty gritty stuff of like, how do you nourish yourself? And that's not like, for me, at least, I don't really get into weight loss or those kind of things. It's about like, really, how do you nourish yourself and tend to yourself in that way, and hydration and movement and, a sense of meaning and purpose. And that kind of then intertwines with that relationship to the sacred, right? Or like your social connections kind of going, it's all tangled together. But, and then some of it is more, to a certain extent, managing long-term illnesses or things like that. This is more health coaching, so I won't be prescribing medications or ordering labs, but I do have an herbalism background. And so kind of using plants to help with some issues probably will be involved. And then, getting into creating rituals for people or creative practices or nature connection. There's just like a whole lot of different facets with it. And so we really I told Ellen before that really the things I'm longing for in my work are just to have enough time to sort of get into all of it and for people to be happy to see me. I think that's one thing, when you work in the ER, like there's a lot of important work to be done there, but if you're there, you're having a bad day. So those are kind of, that's what I'm looking to do with this health coaching. And right now I'm still kind of fine tuning my approach. So I'm offering it at a discounted rate too.
Do you want to share about your Substack?
Oh, sure. And actually that would be a great way to kind of, check me out and see if it's a good fit, because I do definitely have some of my articles that really get into my philosophy specifically. My Substack is called the Nettle Witch MD. And when you sign up for it, you'll get an email with, 3 or 4 different articles I write, but one of them is specifically about my healing philosophy. So.
Yay. So links to all of that will be in the description or the show notes, whatever it's called, wherever you're listening. Amy, thank you so much for your time and sharing your story and your wisdom with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Ellen. It's not often that I get to have this broad-based of a conversation where I get to get into doctor stuff and ancestor stuff all in the same place. So, yeah.
We love it. Oh, awesome. Okay, I'm going to stop recording now. Hello, this is Outro Ellen. Thanks so much for listening today. If you're interested in hearing more healing stories, please subscribe on the platform where you're listening or join my newsletter, Find Your Fierce, on Substack. If you subscribe on Substack, you'll get an email every time I publish an episode, so you'll never miss one. The link to Substack is in the episode description. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can head over to Find Your Fierce and join as a monthly, annual, or founding subscriber. Paid subscribers make it possible for these stories to be shared far and wide, and you'll get access to bonus letters, episodes, and events that are just for subscribers. If you want to go above and beyond, please leave us a rating or a review on the platform where you're listening, or share this episode with a friend, frenemy, lover, family member, boss, colleague, or someone who needs it. I'm sending you the love and peace you need to be your best self today and every day. Audio hugs. Bye.